Hi, Camille. Welcome. I'm glad you're with us this evening. Where were you born? Where were you raised?
Okay. I was born in Huntington, Long Island. That's in New York.
Yep.
I spent my childhood on Long Island. I spent my teenage years in New York City. I went to the Fame High School of Music and the Arts. I went to university in Westchester at SUNY Purchase, and then I fled New York and came to California. And I've been out here ever since.
When was the realization that you were an artist strike you? It has happened, yes.
Oh yeah. I have to say, when I was a little kid, my parents did not give me paper or crayons or anything like that. And I was so desperate that they would find me under the coffee table drawing on the underside of the table, or in the closet drawing on the walls, or under the dining room table drawing on the underside. Finally, my aunt said, you should give her some paper. And I started drawing, and it was a great release for me. I loved drawing specifically. And by the time I was in my teens, I was making drawings and selling them at school in order to raise money to feed my siblings, because my mother was having a bit of a nervous breakdown. And I left home when I was 15, and I stayed in high school by sleeping on friends' couches. That high school was amazing because we had access to not only the major museums in New York City, but we also had a free pass to lots of private collections in people's homes. And we were required to go every week and expose ourselves to art. So I feel like I was very lucky because I had exposure to really good examples of art. And I used to get in trouble in the Met because I would get so close to the paintings, and I tried to touch the Rodin sculptures. And finally, anytime they saw me coming in, they'd assign a guard to me. And they're like, oh, she's back. So I had my own guard with me through the whole museum as a teenager. And I have to say, as a photographer, I fully admit that I was a frustrated painter. I had a painting teacher in university who told me I should never be allowed to paint. That's the worst thing you can tell anyone. And unfortunately, I really was disheartened by that. But I always made pictures, and I never thought that photography was anything special. I didn't think that.
When did you pick up a camera? When did photography become serious?
Well, it didn't become serious until I was 32. But when I left home when I was 15, the school recognized that I was at risk of sort of dropping in a ditch, getting pregnant, who knows. And so they put me in an after-school program where they gave me a film camera. It was a Nichromat. And they took away the manual. They said you have to figure out how to use it. But they taught me how to bulk load black and white film, how to process and develop the film, how to develop the images in the darkroom, and said go out and photograph your experience. And that probably was one of the best things anyone could have ever done for me, because at a time in my life was when I was incredibly angry and confused. It gave me something positive and creative. And one of the gifts, I don't know if you acknowledge in your own life, of being a creative person is you have the ability to, out of nothing, create something. And not only out of nothing create something, but create something beautiful. So in this bleak hole, not until this past year did I ever acknowledge that I was homeless. I never thought of myself that way, but I guess that I was. But having that creative outlet allowed me to express myself in a powerful way. So while I wasn't serious, I just thought, everybody took pictures. I didn't think of it as a skill that I particularly had an advantage of. And so when I was 32, I always had, no matter where I lived, a picture of the World Trade Center with the Brooklyn Bridge to remind me that's where I was from. And I used to work as one of the jobs to support myself as a homeless teenager was as a New York City bike messenger. And so I used to have to deliver things to the World Trade Center all the time. And a lot of the pictures I took of my friends in that period had the World Trade Center always as sort of a backdrop. So in California in 2000, 9/11, I watched the buildings fall. And as I held my daughter, who was just almost 2 years old, I remember thinking that she would never know those buildings in the same way that I had, that she would only know them in a photograph or a film. And I understood at that moment the importance of a photograph as a document of history. And it was proof that these buildings had existed much in the same way that pictures of our grandparents are proof that they existed. And so a switch came on. And so at 32 years old, this switch came on in which I was so frustrated. I was so tired of turning on the television or looking at the newspaper and seeing images of just total despair and darkness and cynicism. And I thought, there has to be another side to this story. And I was raised as a Shinnecock Montaukett Indian, which is a tribe out near Southampton on Long Island. And we were raised to know that, our time on this earth is precious, that everything is interconnected, and that there's something beautiful and awesome about this life. There's something mystic about it. And so I decided in that moment when this switch came on that I was going to document my life and show some of that beauty and that awe. And I have to say, I had no plan. I didn't say, well, I'm going to go to the Arctic and photograph, what's going on there, and this climate change thing, I'll get famous. I didn't have a plan like that. It was very serendipitous, and I just went through the open doors. I've learned in my life and my career as an artist, don't knock your head against a wall that's not giving way. If the door's not opening, either go build your own door or build your own building or city. Like, why keeping knocking on that door? So
yes.
What happened to me when I first started, when the switch came on, I knew I was not going back to school. That was just not an option for me. So I decided to call up any photographer whose work I was curious about, who had done something in a way that I wanted to know how they did that. And one of the first people I called was Steve McCurry, who's a National Geographic photographer, who's famous for the photo of the Afghan girl with the green eyes. And I said to him, I'm really curious about how he works with natural available light. And I think that his color work is some of the strongest color photography that's existed, not to mention his ability as a portrait photographer. And he said, well, if you want to learn about what I do, come with me to Tibet. So I went with him to Tibet, and he kind of reminded me in a very harsh way that photography was about being sensitive to a special quality of light. And he would literally pull me out of the street on a bright blue sky day, and he'd say, what the hell are you doing out here in this light? And he'd pull me into the alleys and he'd say, do you see here what the light is doing? Do you see how it's coming off the wall? And he'd pull some poor Tibetan woman and he'd sit her down and he'd say, do you see what the light is doing to her face? And she'd be like, I don't know what's happening to me, but okay. So Steve really took the time to sort of remind me that it doesn't matter how good your subject is, your composition, if you don't have sensitivity to that quality of light. And that was a very great gift. I called other photographers like Sebastião Salgado. I wanted to know specifically from him, when you're working in the Sahel where people are literally starving to death, how do you operate? Where do you eat? Do you say, oh, excuse me, I have to go eat? Or, how do you behave? And so this is how I re-educated myself and got the skills I needed. All the while, I was looking not only at photographers' work, new and old, contemporary, and vintage, but also I was looking at paintings that touched me from the beginning. I was looking at drawings, I was looking at film and cinema and everything, music. It was all influencing my voice, and I applied it to photography in the way that I said, I like this, I don't like this. If I don't like this, why don't I like this? And slowly figuring out what makes the way that I see different from the way you see. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that if you make another Afghan girl picture, that you're going to get hired by National Geographic. They have Steve McCurry to do that. They don't want to see another Afghan girl. They want to see your specific individual version of the world. And so I learned that. I was quite lucky. I thought I was going to be a photojournalist. I thought I was going to photograph people. And when I started to show my work to magazines and periodicals, they would say, well, this is too pretty. You should take this to a gallery. And so I'd go to a gallery and they'd say, well, this is too informational. It's too documentary. You should go to newspapers and magazines. So I was in this weird limbo of too pretty or too informational. And I was at a very interesting junction because at that moment, I could have changed the way that I could have adjusted to suit the market, or I could do what I did because I have to. I have to be true to myself. And I cannot, it doesn't matter. I said, well, if it's never seen, it's never seen. I have to do it the way I do it. And the next thing I know, both of them were calling me because the magazine said, oh, we want prettier work. And the gallery said, we want more informational work. So it was a reward for me saying, no, this is me. This is who I am and who I want to be as an artist, and I'm not going to sell myself short or become a commercial artist to try and suit the whims of the market. So I was telling my daughter today that I feel, I don't know why or how, I seem to have incredible luck, but I do. And so by 36, I was able to declare, just 4 years after deciding that I was going to be a photographer, I was able to full-time make my living as a photographer. And I did that by really just luck. National Geographic saw my work. I didn't show it to them. Someone handed it to them for me. And they gave me a Geographic Award. It was some money, but more important, it was their stamp of approval. With that, I was granted permission on a Russian expedition to Antarctica for over a month and made more pictures there. While I was on that expedition, the UN announced that climate change was real. And I had been entering competitions, but I have rules. I don't ever enter a competition unless the juror of the competition is of interest to me. If I know that I want to see my work, for example, in the Smithsonian, whether it's the magazine or the museum, if the juror is from Smithsonian, great. If they're from some, guns and ammo, and that's not where I want my work to be, I don't enter the competition. And so I entered this one competition called Critical Mass, which was out of Portland. And I entered it not because I wanted to win, but because this particular competition sent out the entries to over 250 industry professionals, publishers, gallerists, editors, curators for museums, you name it. And just to have my work passed before their eyes for $50 was worth it. I ended up winning that competition, and they published my first book called The Last Iceberg. And when that happened, my life changed quite rapidly because those museums and curators, because I had won, they wanted to collect the work and support me. So I knew nothing, and I learned as I went. I didn't know anything about editions, sizes, prices, nothing. And so I looked at the work of someone who I respected, who I admired their career, and they were in a gallery level that I wanted to be on. And I cold called them up. And this is Chris Jordan. He's an amazing artist up in Seattle. And I called him and I said, you know, this is my situation. A university museum has called me and they're interested in purchasing one of my prints, and I don't know anything. Could you help me? And he was kind enough to spend 2 hours walking me through not only how to price, size, and so on, but also which galleries paid their artists on time, which ones to avoid. And it was really a true gift. I'll forever be grateful. And I do try to pay it forward. So if anyone ever wants to get information like that, I do make myself available. So I called back the museum after my conversation with Chris, and I said, well, for the image that you're asking, that print will cost you $4,000. And without blinking, they said, okay, we'll send you a check. And I thought, damn, I should have said $6,000. So my first ever sale was for $4,000. More than that, the museum in Washington, D.C., the National Academy, sorry, I have a cough, a National Academy of Sciences called me up and they said, we want to fly out to your studio. And I was like, good thing I have a studio. So they came and I showed them the work, and they said, we would like to offer you a solo show in our museum across from the Lincoln Memorial. And I said, but I've never exhibited my work anywhere, not even in a cafe or a local gallery, nothing. And they said, we don't care, the work is important, it needs to be seen. So my first ever show was in a major museum, and they treated me like royalty. They created and framed everything for me, shipped me and my family there, had the Kronos Quartet play at the opening, and over 2,000 people from the government were invited because it was about climate. And during the polar year something, it was a festival. And so this was my start. All the magazines started calling, galleries wanted to represent me. And so my advice to you here, and I tell this to everyone who says to me they're an artist and they want to have their work out there. My friends all said to me, well, you have to, you know, they see my work and they say, you should try to get it in the local cafe. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't see my work there. In my mind, I saw it in a room with white marble floors. I can't tell you how or why, but that was my vision. And they said, well, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to work your way up, you know. And I said, well, then I guess I just, you know, I won't get anywhere. So when this show happened, guess what the floors were at the museum? White marble. And it sort of told me, again, it reaffirmed, be true to yourself and your vision of where you want your work to be, and more importantly, where you don't want it to be. Don't put it somewhere if that's not where you want to. If it doesn't honor the work, if it doesn't honor you, don't put it there. I hear some conversations about having local shows and getting together pop-ups and things like that. Who is your audience? I always tell people I don't have plans. I don't make plans, but I do have goals. And I think you should always aim much higher than you think is even possible, because believe it or not, it is possible. And my goal, like I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking Guggenheim and MoMA, and every choice I make is towards that. If something arises, an opportunity, and it's not helping me towards that goal, I won't do it. It's a waste of my energy. And I'm not saying that, you know, to show your work to your friends in your house or your local, if that's what gives you joy, if that's your goal, then so be it. But I find so many artists not only undersell themselves, but they don't believe in themselves. I have to tell you that each one of you, what we are is we are special antennas. We have our hand connected to the unconscious collective. The thinking of every being and creature on this planet is channeled through us, and we create what is missing. We alter reality so that it is different. We offer a vision that doesn't exist. That's not only a gift, it's mystical. So you have to own that. Own that as a calling, own it as a passion. I think when you do what you love, it doesn't mean you have to starve, but you have to make smart choices. It's not always easy for me financially. I think the life of an artist is hills and valleys. But if you know that you have these hills and valleys, you can start to build a structure so that there's a bridge across the valley and you're not going so deep each time. And so in my case, I realized that selling prints was not enough to support me. I have a 3-legged plan, a tripod. One is selling prints. The other is publications, periodicals, magazines pay me a lot to have my work in their publications. And then the third is speaking. I was lucky I'm a TED Senior Fellow, and through TED I was signed with a speaking agency. And I get paid $10,000 an hour for speaking. So, so that helps to supplement the triangle. You want to keep going, Paul?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, sure. No, this is great. I want to open up for questions in a moment. There's a question that keeps reverberating for me as you discuss all this, and that is, you talk about not so much having plans, and I don't know that I do either, and yes, having goals, and I think I do, but the question that arises for me is, how much are you steering your career, and how much are you responding to opportunities that come? I mean, so being a TED Fellow, you had to apply. You're a Knight Fellow, right? You applied. There are things for which you haven't applied that have come, somebody picks up the phone and calls Camille. Is there a balance? How much do you leave time, consciousness available for serendipity? How do you structure the big picture and the interim?
I think that's a great question, and in some ways they're connected. Like I said, it makes it so much easier to make choices when you have a goal, and you can easily weigh against: is this helping? Yes or no? Is this going to get me closer to my goal? Yes or no? Do I want to spend the time doing that? Yes or no? In the case of do I guide my ship? Like applying to be a TED Fellow or a Knight Fellow, sure, that's going to help me towards that goal. So it's worth it to do it. A lot of things spring off and become available because of it. It's almost like you plant a seed and you end up with these branches that spike out of it. You have so much more opportunity.
Right.
So by being strategic about what I aim for, I have, like I said, just that goal, that end goal in mind, helps me to pick the things to aim for. If I don't know where I want my work to be, I can't tell you how many photographers, artists I talk to don't have a vision of where their work should be seen. They'll take anything they can get. I'd be happy if, it's on their granddaughter's wall. And I think that's not enough. You owe much more to the gift that you have. I always say that my photographs are useless if they end up in a shoebox under my bed. If no one's seeing the work that you're doing, you're only doing half of the work you should be doing. People need to see it, but you need to figure out who is it that needs to see it. Where would it most honor not only who you are, but what the work is? And I want to be really clear, this is not about me trying to get famous or my ego or anything like that. It's about how do I get the work seen? Because the work is what's important to me. On my photos, I never sign the front. I don't want people to be distracted by my signature. It's not about my signature, it's about the image. So think about, what's your highest goal? What's your dream? And I can see, and even in like micro movements in some of your faces, you're like, oh, you start to think about it, and then you're like, oh no, I don't dare. I don't dare speak that. But I want you to write it on a little piece of paper, where you want your show to be, the venue, and put it in your wallet and carry that with you. Because I can guarantee you, if you carry that with you, and every so often you peek at it, you're going to start to make choices and decisions that are going to get your work there. So I spend a lot of time doing nothing. I make myself available for space. I sit outside a lot and just, it's a sky gazing kind of exercise where literally you just allow yourself to become part of the bigger thing. And when you're part of the bigger thing, anything is possible. It's us who build our own roadblocks, and we're the ones who make it so hard on ourselves. I realized that the more I got out of my own way, the more stuff happened. The more I stopped trying to say, it's got to go this way or no way, that more stuff happened. I'll go back to the example of the Arctic. I had no ambition or desire to ever go to the North Pole or be cold. I mean, part of the reason I moved from New York to California was to escape the extreme hot and cold. And the universe had other plans for me. It's like, okay, well, we're going to give you this free ticket to Alaska. And we know who you are. You're going to take it because it's a free ticket. And you're going to go check it out. So I went up there, and I had to walk across the frozen ice by myself. And some things happened. Doors started to open. Windows of what and why I was here on this planet. And so when you start to get the doors open and you have glimpses of why you're here, you have to honor it. If you don't honor why you're here, you're wasting not only your airtime, but your space on the planet. And we need each and every one of you. So you got to step up, do your job, be creative, make work, stop making excuses, stop selling yourself short and saying, oh, I don't deserve it. It's not good enough. Or I'll tell you a story. When I signed that first print for $4,000, I swear to you, my hand was shaking because I just couldn't believe that anyone would spend that much money on a piece of paper just because it had my signature. I was so afraid for 3 years that people were going to say, oh, she's a fraud. She doesn't know what she's doing. You see, look at the grain in her images. And I have to tell you, I was listening to an NPR radio piece and they happened to have one of my favorite filmmakers, Luc Besson, speaking, and he said the same thing, that was when he was going to Cannes Film Festival. He was so afraid that people were going to find out he was a fraud. And I was like, oh my goodness, if Luc Besson thinks he's a fraud, then okay, it's just natural because he's definitely not a fraud. So this thing that happens to us where we feel like I'm not good enough, it's here. And you got to get out of your way, because remember, you're the antenna, you're the instrument. And if you block the signal because of your own bull beep, then you're just hurting your own cause. So you want to talk a little bit more about business?
I want to open it up for questions. Yeah, we can talk about business, and I got questions I can ask if people run out of questions. But I think you're awesome, Camille. I think this is really great, and I think I should just have this play every morning when I wake up, in lieu of an alarm clock. Robin, go ahead.
Hi, Camille. Paul shared with us a link to your website. So I've been weeping all day. I've been so emotional all day. I've been so moved by your images. And then I saw your TED Talk. And it's really, all day I've been questioning this, am I living my highest purpose? And that question is there all the time anyway, but you just brought it home. I saw the icebergs, the polar bears. I heard, I watched that iceberg roll, and there was something you said about the life of the iceberg, the personality, and just that your witness to that. And, there's just no excuse not to live the reason we're supposed to be here. And So I'm highly inspired, and I'm going to work harder to use my gifts. So thank you.
Well, thanks for saying that. And, I don't think it's ever about working harder. It's just It's just about letting go a little. Really, you see the world. Let me say it this way. There are almost 10 billion of us, 9 billion of us on the planet right now. And no one on this planet sees the world quite the way you do. And that's a gift. I mean, that's a superpower. Each one of us has this unique individual ability. And as visual people, we are able to communicate in a very powerful way. What we feel, what we see, our experience, our dreams, our hopes, our aspirations for what the world could be or should be. And when you just acknowledge, literally just like, I don't know if you have to wear a cape for it to happen, but, you know, acknowledge that this is a special thing, and you start to own that, figure out how to own that. What's going to help you own that? For me, it was something really small. I was the most insecure person about saying, when people would meet me, they would say, you know, what do you do? And I'd say, I would almost stutter. I couldn't say, I'm a photographer. So I had some business cards printed. And anytime that, you know, someone would say, what do you do? And I made sure that it had a photo on it. And I'd say, I'm a photographer. Making a business card that said what I was helped to make me personally own it. Oh, well, what, do you do weddings? Well, actually, no, I don't do weddings. And then you start talking. So figure out a way to start to own it, really own it, and understand that you are needed. Each one of you is necessary, especially right now. We are in such an incredibly important and rich with potential time of human existence. We are literally on the razor's edge. And it's artists that are, our vision is what's necessary to help guide people, help inform them, help them feel something about things that can't be expressed in any other way. So figure out how to start to really own it. Does that help?
Yes, yes, very much so. I mean, it's, as I said, I guess you were just really a catalyst to what I've been feeling, and it's, you know, just getting back into the studio, and I have a young daughter, and you know, really considering my purpose, and you know, I guess whatever you said just spoke directly to that.
You know, starting so late in life as a 32-year-old, you know, having this switch come on, I felt like I didn't have time to mess around. I don't have time to act like, oh, geez, I don't know what to do. I just had to literally step in and start walking, because there are other people who had 20 years or more who knew, they stood in that and they owned it. And I felt like, no, I need to just own this. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm going to own it. Every morning I wake up and I say, how shall I serve? And I say it to the universe, how do you want me to manifest? And as a mother, I have to say my daughter has been instrumental and imperative. Without her, I'm not sure the awakening would have been so strong. She was the first creature on this planet that made me feel like, oh, what are we doing? And what am I doing to either help or hinder her chance of survival for the future? So motherhood is very important, and so is fathers, if you're out there. They help to create a signpost for us, sort of a rod in the sand that says, you know, I am here, and what are you doing? What are you doing to either help this rod or knock it down? And a lot of people, when I would speak, they would say, well, how could you leave your child for months at a time and go on these ships and these expeditions? And I'd say, what kind of mother would I be to tell my daughter, I want you to dream big and do everything you dream of doing, but I won't.
Yeah.
I will sacrifice for you. No, I have to show her that when I'm with her, I'm present. I'm fully present and there for her. And when I'm away, I'm honoring that separation by doing the best work that I can do during that time. So that's my mom speech.
Good one, too. Meredith, your turn. Go ahead.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I'm in a very different place because I'm a lot older than most people here. And I think I'm Paul's vintage. And
there you go.
And, you know, I had the feelings that you've had at a much younger age, and was not than you, but in other words, I'm 70 now, and I had this kind of awakening when I was in my 30s also. And most of my life, I kind of buoyed back and forth between, was I supposed to be a teacher of consciousness, or was I supposed to be an artist, until I realized that they were one and the same. And but that has not helped with this swimming into the world, you know. I think that your subject matter, I mean, I'm sure your talent, I have not seen your website, I'm sure your talent is what people are responding to. But don't you think that your subject matter was such a sensitive issue that also pulled an audience together to say, look at this, you know, we need to look at this? And I guess I'm asking you to comment on subject matter, and if you do feel threatened for time, which most people may not, but you know, you have to be cognizant of time when you have spent your life as an artist, and there's not endless years left. So would you like to just respond?
Yeah, I mean, there's some good stuff in there. One thing I would say to start with is, when I was 23 years old, I worked at an architect firm. And one of the principals of the architect, I will never forget his name, it was this lovely Welsh name, Burns Cadwallader. And he was 84 years old, and it was his fourth career. He had kept, he was like, it's not over till he says it's over. And he kept going, and he kept reinventing himself. And he was a great role model for me at that age. And I loved to find out that Julia Childs didn't even learn to cook until she was in her late 40s. That she had been a spy in Burma. And, you know, that, again, like, life starts when you say it starts, and it ends when you decide. So I think one of the best things about being an older artist is you have wisdom and experience and so much to draw from. I think a lot of younger artists are at a disadvantage, especially when they encounter a lot of success in their early 20s, and then they have nothing. I think the people who sort of blossom as they're older do because they have a lifetime of experience to draw from. And so I wouldn't see any age as a thing to hinder you, but I would see it as an advantage. And I would ask you personally, you know, like, do you know what your end goal is? Like, what's your dream? And don't tell me, because that's your personal dream, but and you need to own it and keep it close to your heart. But what is your goal? Because if you are not even slightly clear about it, you need to be like, let me put it this way, the universe will give you exactly what you ask for and not a penny more. So if you say, oh, I really need $100, that's what you're going to get. If you ask for 1,000, you're going to get 1,000. So be really specific about what it is you're asking from your experience on this planet. Do you want it to be this big or this big? And be clear about why. Is it out of fear, What is holding or keeping you from expanding? Or is it out of fear because you think of this thing, this really strange thing, this illusion called security? All of us have this idea of, and artists actually are much better at letting go of this idea of security, but it still haunts us. People who work 9-to-5 jobs and get paid every 2 weeks think that they are secure, when in fact they could work, you've seen it, it's happening, 35 to 40 years, and that pension is gone. They are nowhere closer to anyone who didn't live like that. So the idea of security, you have to relax and know that, I'll put it the way that my grandfather told me, you are billions of years in the making, and you were born of this time for this time. All of the wisdom, experience, the travesty, the tragedy that befell our ancestors is stored in ourselves. We can call upon that for help at any time. So that means we are here right now for a reason. What's your reason? What is it that you dream to do? And why aren't you doing it? Don't use age or even money, or you want to talk about subject matter. When I started going to the Arctic, my friends thought I was crazy. What the hell are you doing going there? There's nothing up there. Why are you going there? For years, still people think, I can't tell you how many people I come across who say climate change. I'm not sure. I don't know. Still out. I'm not sure. And I'm like, you are on drugs. You've lost your mind if you are not willing to acknowledge that we have altered our atmosphere. But there are people still. And my work was not, it was not necessarily, like I said, a plan. I did not say, I'm going to go do this because this is the new hot topic. Same thing with chasing storms. I did it because my daughter said, Mom, you should go do that. I was watching her watching it on TV. And she said, I was like, wow, look at that light. I was vacuuming while she was watching TV. And she said, Mom, you should go do that. And 3 days later, I was doing it. So go through the doors. Don't be afraid. If something opens and you're curious about it and you have a passion or an interest in it, I want to talk about fear a little bit. When I was 23 years old, I got laid off from that architectural job. And at the same time, my friend from high school came from New York to California to stay with us. And he was a surfer. And so in my time of being laid off, he said, you want to come with me, watch me surf? So we'd go to the beach every day. I'd drive out there with him, and I would watch him surf. And after a few weeks, I was like, you know, that looks pretty interesting. I think I'd like to try it. And he said, sure, I'll teach you. So he suited me up in a wetsuit, and he told me 3 basic rules, like don't come up with, unless your hand is above your head, don't turn your back on the ocean, and if you get caught in the waves, relax. We started out, and I swear to you, I was freaking out. The water was cold and murky. We were literally 29 miles from the Farallon Islands, which is a great white breeding ground. And I felt so unstable and awkward on the board, and I turned to him as we're paddling out, and I say, Oliver, I'm scared. And he looked at me, and he paddled away. And I was like, we've been friends for how long? And I tell you I'm afraid, and this is what you do. I waited for him to come out of that water. Ooh, I was so angry. And he comes out, and I say, how could you? I told you I was afraid. And he said something that really stuck with me, and I give it to you. He said, no one can teach you to manage your fears except yourself. And he was right. So every day after that for a year, I'd go and get in the water, and sometimes I would freak out, and I'd say, well, what's the worst that could happen? A great white shark could come and eat me. Well, is that happening right now? No. Okay, well, what's the second worst thing that could happen? Like a wave, I could drown. Is that happening right now? Be present. So often we spend our time fearing about what's coming, what could happen, what might happen. But if you are present and you acknowledge that you have everything you need within you, all of the wisdom of billions of years resides in you. You have everything you need to take care of it, to make the right decisions, to relax, to respond, to get out of the water when it's just not feeling right. And so I practiced this with not just surfing. I started to take on things that I had anxiety about. And I'd say, well, what else am I afraid of? And I start to examine them. And then you start to realize when you lean into the fear, it can't push you around. So let go. Stop. I know each one of you has a fear, whether it's rejection or failure or loss. It's something. And you should write down what that fear is. Really look at it, read it, and then ask yourself, is it absolute? Is it true? Is there no way you can change it? And if it isn't, if you can really change it and you know it's just a line of words, then you can rip it up or burn it. Let it go.
Cool. Kathy has a comment or a question. Camille, this has been great. Kathy, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for being with us tonight. You're really an inspiration and motivation. But I kind of wanted to know a little bit about your work and what drives your work. I've seen your website, but I don't kind of know the sort of the inspiration for you and, you know, just what you're thinking about in your work. Would that be a fair question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. So this goes back to my upbringing as a Shinnecock Montaukett. And I didn't realize until I was in my 30s that I had a very unique perspective. I didn't realize that other people on the planet weren't seeing the world the way that I did. And part of that is because I was raised as Shinnecock Montaukett, and my grandfather, from the time that I was 5 years old, every day after school, rain, snow, heat, wind, sun, it didn't matter. I had to sit outside for an hour. I wasn't allowed to move any further than the width of my arms. And I had to observe, I had to be still and watch. And after an hour, my grandfather would call me into the house and he'd say, "What did you see?" And if I was feeling facetious, I'd say, "I didn't see nothing, Grandpa." Go back outside. So you start to say, "Well, I saw a spider building a web." And he'd say, "Well, that means it won't rain this week." Or I saw a butterfly doing this or the sky doing that. And he would interpret it for me. But more importantly, he was teaching me to observe. From the age of 6 on, he would take me into the woods and he would introduce me to each tree personally, as an individual, not as oak, pine, elm. He would literally say, "Look at the shape of the way the bark moves and the branches." And he'd have me hold it and he'd say, "Listen, and you be still. Slow your breathing," and you can actually feel the tree moving. And he'd say, "This is your relative. This is not a resource or an it or a thing. This is part of your family." In the same way that he said he was part of my family. And that I must respect it in the same way that I respected him. Sometimes he would catch me pulling a leaf off of a tree or something. And he'd say, "You think you're separate from nature? Try holding your breath. Like, who do you think you are that you can just pull this leaf and it has no impact? This leaf gives you the air you breathe." So this was my upbringing. So when I photograph, I'm trying to create a space for people to start that relationship with our planet. We, in our modern society, have isolated ourselves so much from the outside world. We actually think that we are separate from nature, that we somehow sit on some pyramid top and we can do whatever we want to without consequence. And that is going to be our end if we do not turn this around. So I know because of the way I learn, you cannot tell me something. You have to let me feel it or experience it. And so I'm not trying to tell anybody anything. I'm just putting it there and allow them a space. That's my job as an artist. Create a space that says, this is your planet. This is your home. It's your heritage. It's your inheritance. How are you part of it? How are you acknowledging it? How are you honoring it? And so the work, for me, is very much about beauty. I think that you attract more flies with honey. And I think it's really important. There's so much darkness. People have that covered. People have the cynicism and, you know, the negativity down. But I don't see enough of the light that balances that. So that I take on as my role. So when I chase storms, for example, sure, there's devastation and destruction, but that's someone else that can do that. There's plenty of people that do that. I want to be the one that photographs the awe and the power and really the cosmic energy that is present on our own planet. Does that answer?
Yes, yes. So when you're out in nature and you're getting ready to photograph, do you kind of put yourself in that place as a discipline each time? Do you kind of go back to your grandfather's vision of being there and observation, or do you just jump right in?
Well, because I was really raised that way, there's no separation for me. Like I feel integrated all the time. And because of those exercises of observation, I'm aware of so much all the time. My peripheral awareness is very, very on. And that makes me sensitive to a lot of things. Like I can't be in very loud places or too much going on just because it is overwhelming for me. But so my process when I am about to work anywhere is just like surfing. You don't ever just rush out into the waves without sitting and watching the set. You observe the set and the rhythm. You start to understand what's coming, what's out there, what's possible. And the same thing with photographing, whether it's in the Arctic, Antarctic chasing storms, or even photographing my daughter. I don't ever just immediately come out with the camera and like, in action. My process is to sit, be still, observe, see what's going on. And I use my eyes and my camera like a Geiger counter. I say, is this making me feel this way? Because sometimes it's this, and sometimes it's this little thing over here. So by getting an overall feeling, I won't ever pick up the camera if I don't feel something. First, I allow myself I don't even need to know what it is I feel. I just have to feel something. And then once I feel something, that's when I start to say, okay, is it this? Is this what's making me, and is this? And that's how I make my images.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
This has been super fabulous. I've been doing this course for over 4 years, and I mean, Camille comes from a distinct, different perspective, yet the wisdom that she is sharing has been resonates with what others have said previously. And, to some extent, it seems holistic, but to me also, it seems pragmatic. And I think you want to pay attention to that. And there are things when, before I began this course years ago, where I would say, yeah, but I'm different, but my situation is, etc. And having done this now and listened to hundreds of voices like Camille's, a chorus sort of makes me realize that what she has touching is wiser than whatever misconceptions we have that don't conform with hers. I appreciate Camille's wisdom a lot. Carlos, you have a question. Good luck following that. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, I think I want to concur with what Paul just said. I totally was just blown away by your speaking today. It touched on many points that I didn't even realize. It was really good. I'm glad this is being recorded, and I'll be able to listen to it again tomorrow and sort of go into like all the other points that had just gone right by me. you mentioned a few minutes ago something that struck a chord, and you talked about your work being about beauty. For some of us that are painters, or in my case, I've been a designer most of my life, and I've dealt with basically the realm of what is considered beauty. I look at your work and I see the relevance of what you do in today's world. You know, I mean, the whole sort of, obviously, everything that's in the media right now about climate change makes your work very, very of the moment and very valuable in many ways, which when I stack it up against what I do, I'm saying, God, what is the value here? But just right now, when you started talking about beauty, I related to that, because then I realized that, yes, there is a factor. There's so many factors that make what we do viable for us and for the rest of the world. And I guess I just wanted to say thank you for bringing that up, and I truly appreciate you speaking.
Thank you, Carlos. And I want to speak to you and Paul about your comments. You know, the great thing about being an artist is you get to write the way this happens. You don't, you know, I think a lot of us think, well, you have this menu list, you have to, if you do this ingredient in this order, then it equals success, whatever you think success is. And I want to tell you that you can make it the way you want it. Like, if you're like, you know, I don't really want to go that route, I want it to be this. But it involves taking time to really think about what it is you want. And I wonder, can you show me, by show of hands on screen, how many of you know what you want? Yeah. So think about that. Like, what is it you want? Because once you know what you want, then you can think about, well, how do you want to write this story? How do you want it to go? Because if you're like me and you're like, well, I didn't want my work in cafes, then don't do that. It becomes a simple, like, then don't do that. If you know what you want, then you more frequently know what you don't want. And that's another thing. Like, how many of you know what you don't want? Yeah, so spend time working on those, thinking about what you want, what you don't want, because that really helps make the choices a lot clearer. And it really helps aim, like, you know, like I said, my work was not relevant when I started. I did it because I felt compelled to do it. I did it because I couldn't not do it. And I'm sure it's the same for you in what you do. So own that. Cherish that you have to. And then figure out why. Why do I have to? Who is this important for? And yes, it's important. So once you know what it is you want and why you would have this thing going, then you can give it in ways that make sense to what you're doing. A lot of people feel the need to put their name all over their picture, big copyright on the web. I don't bother. I know deep in my heart that it always will come back to the source. People will always want the actual item. They will not want the knockoff. So don't worry about holding so tight if it means now I've got millions of people around the world who have been exposed to my work. Now, does that mean they paid me for it? I don't know. But if it has touched them and other people are able to pay me for it so that I'm able to keep doing what I do, that's enough. But if you can't get the work out there, what are you doing it for? How are you holding tight to your work, and in what ways can you comfortably share it? So those few things.
Let's take one more question because Charles Murray raised a hand. And go ahead.
Hey, hi, Camille. You're awesome, and it's so amazing that the world has your voice to hear. And I'm really curious about, what does Salgado tell you about how does he go into these situations?
Well, so, you know, he has this incredibly heavy Brazilian accent, you know, and I can't do it, so I won't try. But basically, he was like, come on, you know what you do. You know how you behave. If the man who's starving slaughters his only goat to feed you, you eat it and you say thank you. It was that simple. It was like he's like, common sense. Be a human. Be human. You know, I've been out in the field with many different types of photographers, and some of them are shock and awe, especially in foreign countries. You see them either with really long lenses where they're too afraid to get up close and like, they're like assassins. And then the others are, they come up, they see these cute kids, they take the picture and they're like, okay, and they go away. And the kids are like, what the hell just happened? I operate a little differently. I always carry with me a little portable inkjet printer, battery operated. And I use this experience as a chance for a relationship, as a chance for sharing. So I'll make a picture and I'll show it to them on the camera, and if they really like it, I'll print it to them and give them a picture. This is, you know, allowed me to come back to people's homes, to have invitations to come stay with them. I mean, it opens doors left and right. But more importantly, it creates sharing rather than a taking. I'm very careful with the language I use about photography. You probably, if you've watched this back, you'll not have heard me use the word shoot or shot or take. I make. And so making photographs for me is an opportunity for sharing and creating a relationship, an exchange, a little bit of humanity. And so Salgado is one of the people who's like, be human, be a human being. And as Shinnecock Nantucket, we were raised what that means. And what that means is knowing that each one of you is my relative, my relation. And I'm not separate or different from you. I may not know you, but we are of the same blood.
Well, I love the idea that you would be my relative. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Very cool. Camille, this has been absolutely fabulous. I think it's a good moment to stop. You are wonderful. I really appreciate you sharing with us this evening. Let me unmute everybody. Everybody's unmuted. Camille, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very appreciate it.
You guys are so inspiring.
So I'll just say that you can always email me and stay in contact if you have a question that you're comfortable asking.
What is your email address, please? What is your email address?
Hold on,
Is there any way I can-
Camille, hold on one second. Mute everybody and unmute you so that it is not echoey. Go ahead.
So my email address, which is also on my website, and you can friend me on Facebook too. That's the best way to sort of.
And Camille posts lots of cool and significant stuff on Facebook, so yeah.
But my email is camseam@gmail.com. Got that? But it's on my website if you hunt a little.
That's about right. Awesome. All right, Camille, thank you very much.
Buenas noches.